I try really hard to stick to facts, evidence and logic when debating policies and ideas publicly. But when someone else misquotes Scripture to try and support a weak position, it has to be dealt with before we can move on. And there's one verse of Scripture that nearly every non-Christian likes to quote as if it's some silver bullet to silence Christians. I wish I had $1 for every time some lazy amateur theologian butchered Matthew chapter 7 verse 1, which says, "Judge not, that you be not judged." Anytime there's a debate about which way society should go, and one way is right and the other way is clearly wrong, those who want to go the wrong way will ignore the actual merits of the debate being offered by a Christian and attack their character instead. They may even go so far as to say their opponent is a bad Christian, as if they are somehow uniquely qualified to observe the success or failure of the Christian's ambition to serve God. This in itself is more than a tad ironic, if not grossly hypocritical. By what process would one presume to observe another's judgmentality if one could not employ any judgment? Clearly, you would need to be judgmental to tell someone they shouldn't be judgmental, the implication being that they need to be told because they in fact are judgmental, which is being judgmental. Someone flippantly firing the words "judge not" into the debate has resigned. Their logic has failed, and they have got nothing left but poorly executed personal attacks. You should feel free to refer them to the following quick lesson in putting that verse into context, because they're very wrong in their application, and the sincerity with which they offer it will be tested by their willingness to be corrected by someone who's read more than one short verse in that wonderful chapter. You see, Jesus taught us how to judge. That's right. He wants us to be judgmental. He wants us to help people in darkness with light. He wants us to help people embracing lies with truth. And that requires us to be able to tell the difference, or to use good judgment. In verse 5, Jesus explains that we can help people get the speck out of someone's eyes once we remove the obstacles blinkering our own vision. That would require some close scrutiny and some careful judgment. In verse 6, Jesus instructs us to not give what is holy to dogs or pearls to swine. Now, nobody was giving pigs jewellery. He wasn't being literal. He was being illustrative. It requires us to judge which people are behaving like dogs and pigs and not waste our breath on their inability to appreciate the value of what's being shared. In verse 13 and 14, Jesus talks about exactly how intolerant and uninclusive the way which leads to life is. There is a narrow gate that few find, although most certainly all are invited. Sadly, it's a much broader and easier way to go to reject truth on the path to self-destruction. That's right, willful ignorance is a self-inflicted wound. As if Jesus isn't finished teaching us on how to judge yet, verses 15 to 20 of Matthew chapter 7 further describes colourfully to recognise or to judge when someone's outward appearance covers a dangerous reality, contrasting sheep with wolves, grapes and figs with thorns and thistles, good trees and bad trees, and to judge them by their fruit. In verses 21 to 23, he describes the people that will be surprised when he doesn't know them, despite their constant rejection of God's laws. But it's love that compels concern enough to correct someone who's wrong. Trust me, it'd be so much easier to just leave someone in their blissful ignorance, but that would be hateful. And so the chapter on how to judge ends with an invitation to use good judgment to pursue truth, to establish a solid foundation for your worldview and ideology. It also ends with a warning against the predictable disaster of building your life and society on the shifting sands of culture, circumstance, or postmodern relativism. So the two basic rules of biblical interpretation are: don't take Scripture out of either immediate or wider contexts, and Scripture always interprets Scripture. So here are some other scriptures to help us understand what Jesus taught about judging. Read these for yourself. In John 7:24, Jesus said, "Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment." 1 Corinthians 2:15 says, The person with the Spirit makes judgments about all things. 2 Timothy 3:16 says, "All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is useful for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness." Judging. And let's go Old Testament for a second to make sure those who want to bring up Scripture in a logical debate are really aware of the wider context of what they're quoting. Leviticus 19:17 says, "Confront people directly so you will not be held guilty for their sin." The very next verse says, "Love your neighbour as yourself," confirming that judging is a proper expression of love, and that loving yourself obviously welcomes correction. See, when Jesus said, "Judge not," he wasn't advocating universal tolerance, butterflies and bubbles for every stupid idea. He was actually teaching us how to judge. The warning in verses 1 and 2 is to be happy with the standard of scrutiny you lovingly offer in your life and beliefs as well. And isn't that just logical, really? If we are trying to have a democratic debate where everybody gets a chance to try and persuade others of the best way to go, they have to make an effort to really understand the pros and cons of everybody else's best judgments as well. Of course, that's not a loophole to pridefully ignore God's laws, but I'm confident they'll stand up to close scrutiny as well. So the next time someone belligerently tries to silence you disagreeing with them by telling you Jesus said to judge not, point them to this little explanation, and then maybe consider keeping your pearls in your pocket. This is Church and State with Dave Pellowe.